Welcome to Viatorian Voices, where our conversations on the way give witness to walking with youth and those who go underserved, as we strive to do everything well so that through us, Jesus may be adored and loved. In this episode, we hear from Brother Michael Rice. In his decades of religious life, Brother Michael has been a teacher, dean, and principal in several Catholic schools, and spent 20 years as the plant manager for St. Viator Catholic Community. He retired in 2019 from his work in Las Vegas and moved to the Providence Center Retirement Community in 2021, a bit closer to his hometown of Galesburg, Illinois, a town in west central Illinois between Peoria and the Quad Cities. Here, Brother Michael shares about discerning into religious life, his life of ministry, and his recent work in retirement, researching and chronicling his hometown. I'm your host, Associate Dan Masterton. After you listen, help us tell the Viatorian story by rating our podcast in your favorite app, sending this episode link to a friend, and praying for and encouraging young men considering Viatorian religious life. For starters, I asked Brother Michael how he first encountered the Viatorians. It turned out he was thinking of religious life already, and Viatorians in Peoria would make their way to Galesburg and his alma mater, Corpus Christi High School. Interestingly, younger Michael was considering priesthood, but he would go on to be a lifelong brother. What he was more certain about was wanting to become a teacher. Enter the Viatorians.
In my senior year in high school at Corpus Christi, it just so happened that Ken Yarno was Vocation director, and it was the habit that he would go from Catholic school in Illinois to other ones, and he happened to come to my school. He talked to our religion class, and at the end, he passed out little cards and asked us to fill them out. The key question is, would you like to talk to me about religious life, and specifically about the Viatorians? I went in to see him, and I think had a good introductory meeting, and I was able to share with him that I was thinking about religious life. He was hosting something during Christmas vacation, and it was an invite to high school seniors. I know some of them came from Springfield, so I ended up actually meeting one or two people who became novices with me here the following July. And before I would have met him again, he had sent some material about the Viatorians and about the group of novices who were here. And it just so happened that one of the guys who was a novice at the time, John Brady, he is from Peoria. Well, he used to live in Galesburg before his dad, who was a pharmacist, had closed up shop in Galesburg, moved to Peoria. And he and I, when every other year, we would play Spalding and basketball there, and then they would come to Galesburg and play us. Well, he and I would visit when I was playing freshman sophomore ball. After that game was over, we would sit in the stands and kind of converse and so forth. Well, I found out that he was here as a novice. So he was instrumental indirectly in my wanting to be able to talk to somebody to kind of get a sense of what was this group all about. When I was looking at early stages of thinking about religious life, I wanted to teach because I was taught by the Sisters of Providence, grade school and high school, and I had a couple of sisters that I had for, well, one in particular I had for English and also 3 years of Latin. She made a profound impact upon me as far as wanting to be a teacher and actually teach Latin, which is what I did. In meeting John and spending 2 days here, it was kind of the warm-up before going to Pistachey Bay. That's where guys my age and so forth came for this mixing and getting to know one another a little bit. In having attended that, it was very attractive because of the number of schools that the Viatorians then had in Illinois and also the size of the congregation. So it was like one thing kind of led to the next. Towards the spring of my senior year, my senior teacher, the one I had English and also Latin, was our homeroom teacher. She had good rapport with all of us. And somewhere I must have filled out something indicating that I was planning or looking forward to applying to the Viatorians. In kind of a passing conversation, she had said something to me, "Oh, I'm glad to hear that you're going to be doing." Well, that kind of pushed me over, over that. Says, well, it's time for me to make a decision. They sent the tests down to take the things we had to complete, for admissions purposes. And it was very easy to kind of work through the process. It was not stressful or anything like that.
Following First Vows, Brother Michael joined our community of college students in Chicago in what was then known as the scholasticate, and went to study at Loyola University, Chicago. It was during that time that his first teaching opportunity arose.
first opportunity kind of came by surprise. I was finishing up my junior year at Loyola, and because we basically went to school 12 months out of the year because we were taking courses in the summer, I was almost completed with my undergraduate studies after 3 years.
Wow.
Sacred Heart Sisters, who had a boys' elementary school, Hardy Prep, across from the scholasticate, and also had a high school, they had asked me to translate something for them. I had taken it from Latin to English and gave it to them. I don't know if that might have been kind of a test to see how much did this fellow really know.
Yeah.
Shortly thereafter, they offered me an opportunity to teach 2 courses at the girls' high school, teach freshman Latin, and then teach junior, senior Virgil. So I was able to fit that in with what courses I still had to complete. So that was my very first opportunity to have my own class, be responsible for prepping things and so forth.
Brother Michael was not destined to stay in the classroom forever. He was pulled into school administration as a dean and assistant principal at Griffin High School in Springfield, Illinois. And he'd later also serve in administration at St. Francis in Wheaton and St. Viator High School back in Arlington Heights. While he admits needing to learn on the fly, Brother Michael felt capable thanks to being well connected to his students and colleagues.
I think I had been in the classroom for maybe 5 years when I was asked to move from the teacher role to the assistant principal role. Sometimes I find myself thinking about it, says, well, okay, I knew what I was doing because of prior experience of kind of learning the trades and so forth. But I would say to myself, okay, now I'm an assistant principal for academic affairs. What do I do now? Because it was a brand new learning curve. And I think for probably most of us, depending upon what our experience has been, in moving into something that's brand new, it takes a minimum of at least a year just to kind of get your feet on the ground. Yeah. Looking back, I wouldn't say I was really prepared. It was learning as going. But what I had that was working for me, I would have been at Griffin High School for at least 5 years when I was asked to move into administration. So I was known, I was liked, I was listened to, I had good rapport with a lot of different people and also with students. And probably one of the things that helped feed me is having known so many students and worked with them on different kinds of things. Being able to continue being the yearbook advisor was a wonderful experience. And some of those adults now who are 50 and 60 and so forth, they're still a part of my life and I still am in contact with them. So those are very fond times to think back on.
As you can imagine, school administration isn't always smooth and easy. Luckily, happy and joyful stories do come along. As Providence would have it, when Brother Michael suddenly needed to advertise for and hire a Spanish teacher at St. Viator High School, a young man who was an alumnus saw the ad and threw his hat in the ring. Here's how Brother Michael hired Mr. Dan Leiden.
That was my first year at the high school. We had just come off of the faculty staff retreat, and I think the woman, she taught Spanish, and she had been there for quite a while, but she had just learned that she was diagnosed with breast cancer, and spoke to me and spoke to some other people in the faculty and said, I need to go into treatment. I need to step back from my teaching position. And that was the catalyst that meant that we started advertising in the newspaper. Dan, has told me the story that he happened to see something in the paper saying that St. Viator High School was looking for a Spanish teacher.
Awesome.
She was in the driver's seat as to if she was well enough. We got the feeling that she wanted to come back, but it got to be about March. And I remember having a conversation with Dan after having talked to Charlie, saying to him, I would really like to be able to have a spot to offer him, even though I don't really have one right now to do that. Can you help me? And he had said, let him know that we will find a spot for you. You don't have to worry about that. Dan has been good enough to remind me of that. And it just so happened, she was very gracious, said, I've decided that I'm going to retire from teaching. So that opened the door for me to be able to say to him, Dan, when we hand out contracts, you're going to be receiving a contract. And the rest is history.
Eventually, Brother Michael stepped out of the school's front offices and into a back office role. In support of Pastor Father Richard Wrinn and St. Viator Catholic Community, Brother Michael managed the facilities and grounds of the parish for almost 20 years. It brought a different challenge and different joys.
Where I was always blessed in so many ways that there was a man who was the head maintenance person for all the properties of St. Viator Parish. And as you've seen, there's a lot of different buildings at school. Yeah. This guy could do about everything. So in many ways, he mentored me of what to look for, how to be more observant, what I needed to know in order to be successful at what I was doing. And some of the companies and their employees that had interactions with all the time, because every trade you can imagine that is going to be in a church and in a school, I was dealing with on a very regular basis. So they helped my learning curve, filling in what I didn't know, and may have been smart enough to know that I had a lot to learn, and so forth. And in some ways, not being a school administrator was really quite refreshing. And Richard Wrinn we would tease one another. There was not a part of that whole complex that we did not touch in one way or another to continue to make it better. I think one of the things that Richard just needed to be patient with the best he could was the selling of the community center property, which was across the street. It reduced the footprint. He got a great price. That money, which is really earmarked for the school, has given them the cash to be able to continue to do other things that I think they otherwise might have struggled to do. And the fact that school, that they have an endowment fund. And John Keating, he served as the president of the Parent Group Foundation. And Richard realized and got the diocese to support that. The school foundation has loaned the parish money in order to continue to do things, and the parish has always paid them back. It is a great win-win situation.
Now in retirement, with his 80th birthday coming up next year, Brother Michael has the blessing of solid health, a sharp mind, and the time to choose his own adventures, including now serving on St. Viator High School's Board of Trustees and its Buildings and Grounds Committee. But perhaps his greatest joy is stepping out to return to Galesburg. Not only is he catching up with family and friends, but he has a new passion project.
About a year ago, March, I was visiting my sister and her husband in Galesburg, and we were having an Italian meal with my friend Connie. And Connie had said, it's a shame that we don't have any of the pictures and the stuff that used to be in Corpus Christi High School of the graduating classes when it was all boys, and also stuff about the girls' school, etc. There's kind of like a void. My comment to her had been, well, I think we could solve that. From that, we started to do our legwork, spent 3 days with the Sisters of Providence at their mother house in their archives. Did the same thing with the Galesburg Public Library, what they had, with Knox College. And we came across some things which will be in these books that probably have not been looked at or seen in 50 or 75 years. Since there's a history of at least 160 years, our objective is to try to show people the history of this community, how it was in the beginning, how it has changed over time, and what kind of a heritage that they have. And along the way, they may discover some things even about themselves and their own family, especially if that family has been in the Galesburg area for a long, long period of time.
Brother Michael's research has turned up fascinating stories and artifacts. You'll have to stay tuned for the publications, but he lets us in on 2 stories here. First, his alma mater, Corpus Christi, has a unique claim to fame in the history of high school athletics.
In the 1930s and 40s, Catholic high schools were not permitted to play in the state playoffs. They were not a part of the IHSA. The Catholics had a state tournament, played in Chicago, played at Loyola Gym, hosted by the university, and different high schools from Illinois and also across the country came to Chicago and played. And they had both a state title that Corpus Christi won in 1934. and then got second nationally that same year. We have clippings that are from the Chicago Tribune or other Chicago papers that were covering all that.
While Brother Michael certainly cherishes his hometown, he's not afraid to report the darker sides of history too. In this second story, he shares about the rail lines through Galesburg that brought migrant workers to the area, and how members of the Mexican community had to deal with racist, exclusionary treatment.
In the St. Patrick's piece, the Mexican community that came to Galesburg after the 1900s, and they worked for the CB&Q or they worked for the Santa Fe, because there's two railroad lines that run through my hometown, that they were not allowed to live in the city of Galesburg. They were referred to as the boxcar people. Well, we have, in the St. Pat's section, we have testimonial letters from about 6 families, and they're beautiful pieces, that they're uplifting, they're positive, but they also tell some of the hardships that they lived through. A young man from one of the families served in World War II, served in Europe, came back after the war, and went to the theater in downtown Galesburg to watch a movie. And the usher came up to him and said, "Because you're Mexican and black," and says, "You can't sit here. You got to sit someplace else." Well, this fellow tells a story. He said, "You can tell me that, but I just spent the last 2 or 3 years fighting America's enemies in Europe, and I'm going to sit where I'm going to sit." End of discussion. There's some of that kind of stuff, and that gets back to, why are we doing this? What is it that people who will take the time to read some of the stories of people's lives and what they did, and may be touched by something?
Brother Michael and his collaborators are preparing their work for publication. Meanwhile, he continues to enjoy retirement life with his brothers, and he singles out a few in particular, including one dear departed who passed away since we recorded this.
I'm going to single out 3 guys that are here. I think our lives are intertwined, and I'm thinking of Charlie Bolzer, Arnie Perham, and John Van Weel. And even to this day, probably more so with Arnie and with Charlie, we sometimes brainstorm certain things that we see, certain things that we think we can maybe offer another perspective on.
That's all for this episode of Viatorian Voices. We'd like to thank Brother Michael for his decades of generous service to our Viatorian communities and his continued witness to religious life for Viatorians. We pray for his continued health and joy. Viatorian Voices, Conversations on the Way is a production of the Viatorian community. Viatorians are professed brothers and priests and women and men lay associates. Together, we proclaim Jesus Christ and his gospel and raise communities where faith is lived, deepened, and celebrated. In the footsteps of Venerable Louis Querbes and under the patronage of St. Viator, we strive to do everything well so that through us Jesus may be adored and loved. To learn more about our community, visit Viatorians.com or follow us on social media at Viatorian USA. Those seeking accompaniment and exploring God's invitations are invited to reach out to Vocation Ministry. Send a DM on social media or email vocations@Viatorians.com to start a conversation. Finally, you can help us tell the Viatorian story by rating our podcast in your favorite app, sending this episode link to a friend, and praying for and encouraging young men considering Viatorian religious life. On behalf of the Viatorian community, I'm Associate Dan Masterton. Venerable Louis Querbes, inspire us. St. Viator, pray for us. Adored and loved be Jesus.